Hi students, I'm going to show you how to fill out the reading notes that you're going to do for the next couple of essays, and I'm going to use Mother Tongue as an example. So by this point you should have already read Mother Tongue or maybe listened to it and followed along with the text, and then you can also review my notes here. So these are all my notes. I didn't find them from some other source. These are notes that I took on this particular essay. So now I'm going to go over here and complete the grid, the graphic organizer for Mother Tongue for my notes. So it starts with message, but I'm going to come back to that and do that part last. The first thing I want to look at is the structure. So I want to determine how the essay is structured, how it moves through the ideas. So I'm going to note a couple of different things. First of all, I put this in the notes over here. The intro is short. So I'm going to type short intro. I think that's important that it's only 2 sentences. You'll notice this in several of the essays we're going to read, that they don't all start with this really long introduction like maybe you've been told to have in your writing. So I think that's just important to know. Her next paragraph, she talks about who she is. So she talks about who she is. And that's important too, and to set the stage for where we get to the next part. In the third paragraph, she starts to get to the point. I noted that she uses the word recently, and so that indicates this is a transition. So it's really sort of a 2-paragraph introduction. She sets the stage a little bit, and then she tells who she is, and then she moves into what she's actually going to be talking about. Okay, so she transitions to her topic, and she starts with, let's transition with an anecdote. An anecdote is just a short story about giving a talk with her mother in the room. Because that's an important part of the story, right? That her mother's in the room, and it makes her change how she speaks. It makes her see and hear herself in a different way. So then moving on, she goes into the next paragraph where she talks about the type of English she uses with her mother. Okay, so she explains the type of English she uses with her mother, which is different from the English she uses other times. Okay. Next, moving on, she explains in detail what her mother sounds like. So explains how her mother speaks with an anecdote. So she's telling a lot of stories here. So this is this lengthy paragraph, and she's got this whole long quote about how her mother told this story. And really what's important there, I think, is that we get the meaning, even though the English is maybe not as grammatically correct as Amy Tan's. So then she transitions into how her mother really is quite bright and also is quite literate. She understands a lot. It's just that her speaking makes it sound like she maybe doesn't understand as much as she would otherwise. So she goes on to explains how her mother really understands more than one might think. She reads challenging texts and understands them. Okay. Then we get more reflection. So she reflects on her mother's language use. And then she goes on to how her mother is treated based on the way she speaks. Based on her speech, based on her spoken English. To be more specific there. Okay. And she tells some stories about acting on her mother's behalf. All right. That's pretty revealing stuff too, because of how others treat her mother based on her English. And then she goes on to her own educational experience. Explains her own educational experience in several anecdotes. So she includes a few here. She talks about the standardized testing. She talks about the word analogies. So she spends about 3 paragraphs on this. And then she transitions back to a more broad view of Asian Americans and education in a more broad sense. All right. And then she talks about how she became a writer, transitions to her writing career, and lastly, she brings it back to her mother and ties in her mother and her writing. Ties in her writing and her mother. Okay. So that's just kind of the structure. I think it's important. I'm kind of detailed here. Yours may not need to be quite so detailed. But it is important that she moves through and talks about who she is. She tells a lot of stories about herself, about her mother, about the two of them together, and then brings it together and talks about her own writing and her mother. Okay, so the favorite or best line, I haven't forgotten about message. I'm going back up there. For me, I really like, there's a lot of lines I like in this, but the line that really sticks with me is this one up here from the 3rd paragraph. My mother was in the room. And why is that important? Because it shows how Tan adapted her language for the audience and purpose when she's speaking. So when she's speaking with her husband, when she's speaking with her mother, she speaks differently. She talks about the language of intimacy and the language that relates to family talk. So she switches back and forth between different Englishes depending on who she's speaking to and what the purpose is. And that's really important because most of us do this on some level. Some of us may speak different languages, as in maybe we speak Spanish in one context and English in another context, or maybe we mix the 2 languages together, or maybe we use different types of language with our children or with our friends or with our parents also, in terms of slang, or maybe when we if we swear, or we might simplify how we speak to children. Okay, so then we come back to what is the message. So I'm going to ask you about the messages about articles that we read quite a lot, and know that there's not always one right answer to this. So you will be asked to support your claim for why you think a message is what it is, but there's usually several good responses. So I think there's a couple messages at work here, and a lot of times with the essays we're reading for this class, we're going to look to the end of the essay to find what the thesis is or what the point is. So I think one of her comments here is that simple language, or language that communicates clearly, is best. Or maybe something about the point of writing and speaking is to communicate. I think that's clear because she understands what her mother's saying, even if there are some grammatical errors in it. You might take away the idea that just because someone doesn't speak or write perfect English doesn't mean they, I like this part down at the bottom, they don't have intent and passion and understanding. Okay, so there's a couple of different things that I think work best for determining the message here. I think one other point I sort of made when I was talking about my favorite line is we speak differently. Let's see, that's better. Adapt how we speak depending on the people we are speaking with, speaking to, and the purpose of our speaking. The purpose and context. Okay? I like that one probably best. I think that's pretty good. All right, so with that, that's how you fill out this, the reading notes sheet. Mine are pretty thorough. Yours might be a little bit more brief than this, but that gives you a basic idea. So I hope that helps you out.